Hi, I'm George Amabile, author of Ideas of Shelter, published by Turnstone Press, The Presence of Fire, published by McClellan and Stewart, and Martial Music, published by Signature Editions. The first poem I'll read is called Pilar Veronica Cruz. At the hotel, they tell me it's dangerous to walk the beach at night, but I'm drawn to its crash and spray, boat lights that blink like fat stars, and along the shore, candles, paper lanterns, the soft wash of guitars and voices. The waiter smiles. A child sidles up to my table. She's 10, maybe 12, small for her age, wants to see the notebook I'm writing in, draws awkward birds, a stick priest, and a clown, signs her name laboriously. Pilar Veronica Cruz. Asks who I am, where I come from, where my wife might be tonight, and if my children love to dance. She has seen me here before and wonders, why do I eat alone? And why do I stay so long when the meal is done? For the lights, I say, for the breeze, for the night sky. And she looks out at the sea, a child scribbling in my notebook, out after dark, on her own, like me. This one is a poem that I wrote for my son, Evan, while he was traveling in Peru. It's called Country Road. This is a time of day after the sun goes down and before the moon rises, when the light is thin and very still, when it hardly matters where we came from or where we might be going, the air enriched by nothing more than it can easily carry. And being alive in this place is the same as being anywhere where the first lights come on in the valley, where birds return from dying fire at the edge of the world and sing themselves to sleep in the tall trees. Thank you very much for listening.
Hi, I'm Patrick Friesen, one of the early poets with Turnstone Press, and congratulations on this anniversary. It's a long time, 45 years. That means I was 30 when I published my first book with them. And that began because of Dorothy Livesey. Livesey was a big presence in Winnipeg. She had been born there and she returned in the 70s to be writer-in-residence at the University of Manitoba and to found CB2, the magazine. And I was involved with that part of her return, CB2. I ended up being an editor there for a while. But I hadn't published anywhere. I'd published in a few magazines that were not typically literary journals. And so I didn't have a presence at all really in Winnipeg, except where I happened to know people. Dorothy invited me to read at the University of Manitoba. I turned her down the first time because I was too terrified to read aloud. It was like going naked suddenly on stage. And a year later, she tried again. And this time I had seen a few readings, so I thought I could do that. So I did attend that one. What was interesting, though, was what came after. She invited me to her office, and somehow or other, she had a sheaf of my poems. I can still see her holding them. And she paced her office. I sat in her chair, and she paced, orally editing the poems, which was, I realized later, probably a really an amazing honor to experience that. But I didn't know how to take it. I don't remember a word she said about the poems. I just sat there stunned. Then there was a knock at the door. A couple of guys showed up. She told me they're starting Turnstone Press. She asked them if they knew my poems. They didn't. And of course, there was no reason why they should have. And she said, "You're going to publish this guy." And so they did. And that was 1976. And it was a chapbook called The Lands I Am. And it was the third of their books they published. The first two were by Michael Tregaboff and George Amabile. The two poems I'm going to read here today come from the 8th book and last book I published at Turnstone, called Blasphemer's Wheel. It's new and selected. But the poems originally came in earlier books, and then I included them in Blasphemer's Wheel. First poem is Shakespeare's Horses, and it was originally published in Unearthly Horses, 1984. As you can tell by those titles, horses have always fascinated me. Their elegance, their grace, their beauty. It starts with my grandfather, who hated cars, and continued till the day he died at age 80 in 1960. He came to town with his team of horses, Barney and Prince, bringing cans full of milk to the dairy. So those horses, and then much later, my father retired, and he bought some land near Oak Bank, Manitoba, and he started buying old used up racehorses and retraining them as polo ponies. So I learned to play polo. Anyway, horses intrigued me because they were so real, so graceful in their shape, snuffling away, sweating. They were physical reality, but they were metaphors, they were symbols, they were ideas, they were representational. I read them in literature, and I became interested in that connection between the reality of the physical horse and all the ideas and metaphors related to the horse. And Shakespeare's Horses begins that way. It begins with the horses, and then it tries to explore the reality of the horse versus the disconnected ideas that emerge out of it, that disconnect people from reality often, and abstract ideas. You know, I always think, so one of my profs once said, you begin with an idea, it becomes an idol. People worship it and believe it. Then it becomes idle, I-D-L-E. It becomes useless. It's dead. But ironically, that's when human beings believe the most, when it's already dead. The original idea was probably too shocking for them to believe. Anyway, that's a whole nother subject. Shakespeare's Horses. Shakespeare's horses are galloping. From the woods, you can hear bridle and harness. First, you see them as shadows. Then they spurt into the sunlit field, snorting as they're reined in. Sweat sprays from their rearing heads. You can smell them, touch them. They are, after all, horses. Let me say it like this. Things from the head pass through mirrored rooms, become enamored of themselves, like movie stars. They play themselves to perfection. The idea is to make real the idea, isn't it? The idea is to know, but to know what? To know all our remedies mire us deeper, that each new order sinks us more profoundly into what we are, that nothing can be done. Because there are too many busy doing, the extravaganza carries on, that this rendering of time will simply give way to another. Comfort the dying, that is a calling, and that for the rest, a horse laugh, if you can find it in you. And the second poem I will read is also just sections of a longer poem called Anna. I wrote this in collaboration with Stephanie Ballard, the choreographer, to put on as a performance, text and dance. And the process was I would write something, I'd bring it to her apartment, and we'd discuss it and talk it. I'd come back to the new batch the next day, and she'd show me on video what she had done with a dancer. I think Gail Peterson Hiley was the dancer she used to work with. So she showed me video of it. I also noticed that there are footprints on my blue pages, and she told me that she walked on them, that there was a sense that she could absorb what was on those pages through her feet. So there you have my words and you have her feet. There you have dance and text. And dancers are often fairly mystical at the same time as they're very pragmatic in other ways. And we did a performance at the Gas Station Theatre, corner of River and Osborne, 1987, probably in June, I think, with Margie Gillis, the lead dancer, 5 other dancers from contemporary dancers, which I had a connection to because my daughter was a student there. This dance piece, Anna, was incredibly important to me. It's called Anna, by the way, after my great-grandmother, Anna Sawatsky, and Anna Akhmatova. They both find their way in there, but you won't be able to spot that. It taught me something about the relationship of the human body to language, and therefore to the realm of thinking, how you can think with your feet and how you can move with your language, and just that interfusion of language and dance. And I became a huge dance fan after that because I began to see it differently than I'd ever seen it before. It was like poetry in that poetry is coded language, right? You use your precise language as a code to imply many things. And dance is coded physical gesture and movement to imply things as well. So my long line, which had been based partly on the beat writers, Jack Kerouac, for example, and on Bill Evans' long piano lines, by this experience, movement into the. I reworked that piece then for a book called You Don't Get to Be a Saint, 1992, and I reworked it once again for Blasphemer's Wheel, 1994. So sections from that. How to speak once more about the flesh and the spirit, the red heart and the blue wind. Let's say it was 1958. Sail Along Silvery Moon was on the radio. It was Sunday afternoon in July. I remember the river and swallows swooping low over the water. Silver medallions fluttering on their chests, the Catholic boys ran along the springboard and jackknifed into the Seine River. There was something ominous about the muddy water, like a dream. Anything could be there. Venomous snakes, weeds and roots to clutch at you, or simply depth, something ominous, and those lean white bodies of faith disappearing with graceful dives. I held my breath each time, wondering if this one would drown forever and not return. How could he possibly rise from that darkness of river and overhanging trees? How could the water give him back to light? But always, each boy exploded into air, returning from death or dreams, flinging wet hair from his eyes, shouting defiance at the shore, and each of us shivering there. And then the sun was so bright, dancing in the spray around the diver's head, so bright on his long arms cleaving water, you could hardly believe in anything. Let's say it was 1958. I was sitting on the fender of Father's blue Dodge, and it was Sunday, and I didn't want to ever leave the river again. I was eating a persimmon, trying to think of God. It didn't work. My tongue wouldn't let me get away with it. There are no miracles, only mirages in the desert and disappearances in the river. There's nothing human that isn't betrayed. And I know nothing but what's human. My hands, my tongue, my face in a mirror. I don't love the prayer rug, obedience or disobedience, nothing that absolute. I love the Babylonian body and the human wound. I love the surprising word, the sinuous approach. I like the world, approximately. The way grandfather smoked a cigarette in the garden, his feet lost among the potato plants, the way he smiled and I smelled the drifting smoke, his stories hovering among the raspberry canes, the way he leaned on his hoe forever. I love words in the air, balanced between mouths and ears. I love the way there's smoke before there's stone. But it's true. I think there's not much a voice can say. There's a limit, I guess, to art. There's no end to desire. I was caught in the rain. It was the day I knew my death. Not everyone's that lucky. Everything came together. Everything was there. My footsteps behind, my footsteps ahead, my unborn children. Everything was there. And I knew the number of my days, but I lost it. My bones are white. It's what I know from grandfather's farm. What's left in the fall. Scattered bones where horses wheeled all summer. The wind low in the grass and the sudden cold sweeping rain. I lost everything I thought I was and had. Didn't have a thing. It was a lie I made. Didn't know I was that kind of God. Didn't know I'd believe my own memory. Sometimes it feels like I'm sculpted. Don't know anymore who's the sculptor and who's shaped. Like Giacometti's figurines, not covered from, but towards something. I'm sculpted into dust till there's nothing there, or something like nothing. I must think this is some version of divinity. What else to call it? There's no purpose here. There's nothing to know. There's just this seeing, this continual seeing. I must think this is heading somewhere, that I am at that random moment when the chisel can't stop and chips a last feature into crumbs, when I'm plaster dust in the sculptor's hair or his white footprints on the street. There's something about the river. I grinded in my sleep. Something about rivers, how they touch what we forget. There's no end to the river. Where we walk, there's no end to our walk. It doesn't take much. A scent of lilacs or rose oil, a song. It doesn't take much to remember the world, always how it was, the way memory spills through what I see or touch or hear, and there's no end to it, like desire. I remember there was no need for the altar, icons or text. I didn't know I was being tried. I was barefoot for a moment, looking for my shoes, something to make me human. I was looking for a hat, not just any hat, my hat. I was looking for a hat. Memory is a scar I love to touch, but will never trust. The future, because I was born, I trust and can never touch. So I straddle time, taking the scraps memory offers and wanting them again and again. I was eating a persimmon. It's not much to believe or say. There are mirages in the mirror. Yes, I betray my tongue with silence. I'm shivering with delight. Thank you.